all your books, if somebody was to come to you and say, we're gonna make a movie out of one of them, which one would you like to do and why?
Well, that's fun. I think that the Sometimes Sister and the Substitute Sister would be a great Netflix series
I think so.
because it's already got two seasons built in or more. I think if I did a movie, I think it would be Trust Issues because Trust Issues is just well, it could be. It's not a rom-com. It has some dark stuff in it, but Trust Issues you could get a little bit younger cast. Yeah. And I have a teenage character in there who would be a whole lot of fun.
I loved your teenage character. She was a hoot. Hi, I'm Kat Filer, author of Shadowrunner and your host. Join me as I speak to some of your favorite authors and introduce you to new ones right here on Writer to Writer. Hello, and welcome to the very first interview, very first episode of Writer to Writer. And my guest today is a friend and mentor, Catherine Stager Nichols, known to me as Kathy. And she is here today to talk to us about several things. She is a writer of Southern suspense with heart and humor. And she is also the person who is really responsible for me having a book out. She has walked me through an awful lot of things, including approaching an editor and talking to publishers and how that goes. And she's also helped me with my first book launch. I was at a book launch with her and learned an awful lot about book launches there and book signings too. Thank you for being here, Kathy. Thank you for being my first guest. It's such an honor to have you.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. It's so much fun because we work together on our writing, which is what the podcast that we have, Wild Women Who Write Take Flight, a group of women who work together on our writing and supporting each other and encouraging each other. And that's really all the part I had in your getting your book out there. We had accountability. I think accountability, and we can talk about critique groups forever and ever because they're wonderful. If you're writing and you're not in one, try to find one. And if you don't like the first one you go to, shop around because it is a matter of clicking. But because we women supporting women and dealing with women's comments and women's approaches to developing a novel, I really think that touched what Kat needed to go on with saying, "Oh, I can do this. I can finish this book. If she can finish a book, I can finish a book." That's kind of how our podcast started. Well, she had a podcast. I can do a podcast. So it was just more of the encouragement that we had going on. But it's lovely to be here because, as I said at one other time, it's like this continuum of support that just keeps flowing.
It is. And the other thing too about Writer to Writer is it put me in touch with other communities too. So you are also involved in Atlanta Writers Conference and Sisters in Crime and just a number of things. I would love for you to talk about that.
The Atlanta Writers Club and the conference, we have two conferences a year, one in November and one in May. And I highly recommend if you are a writer, check out the website. It's just Atlanta Writers Club, and you'll find a wealth of information. It's extremely reasonable. I can't quote you a price right now because they have all these great deals going on. One lady is going to be a member until she's 99. So we're like, yeah, they have some great deals. And the conferences are excellent because they are cafeteria style. A lot of conferences, you have to chunk down a lot of money. And it's great if you want to go to everything, but when you're at different points in your career, there's certain things you probably don't have to go to. They're wonderful, you get something from them, but you, as for paying for them, you'd kind of rather not. So the Atlanta Writers Conference gives you an excellent choice of those and opportunities to pitch your work to agents and editors, to have your manuscript critiqued. So check that out. It's great. I'm also on the board of Sisters in Crime. I love, and we are sisters and in parentheses, misters. So there are some men in our group. And all you have to be in that group is someone who has a crime in your book. We also have readers in that club. You don't have to be a writer. The difference between the two organizations is Sisters in Crime is affiliated with a national group, which gives you opportunities to check out what's going on in other parts of the country and take part in those. And that and Wild Women Who Write, um, which is a joy. And, I don't even think of it as any kind of responsibility. So I recommend, here's the problem, you only have so much time. And when you write, even if you get signed with a big publisher, you're going to have to promote. And most writers would rather just write. I mean, I love talking to people, but I'm kind of an introvert. I get energy from writing and thinking on my own. So you need to keep that in mind. And the more people that you know, the more ideas you'll get. So, when Kat says things about book launches, I've copied people that I liked what they did. And I also have a philosophy that I can share. But was there anything else you want to know about the organizations?
No, please share.
Okay, you get me wound up. I can't stop. But what I like to think of book launches as are parties to thank the people who hopefully have read my book and hopefully will buy the next one. So I set them up um, kind of depending on the time of year, the time, where they're going to be. My first book launch was for the Sometime Sister. Part of that was set in Ecuador, so I had a blast. My daughters helped me get Ecuadorian flags. We strung those up. We had a tiny bit of Ecuadorian food. It can be a little, I'm not that good of a cook, so it was a little tricky. I didn't want anybody to go home like with food poisoning from shrimp ceviche that was too ceviche. So I had a great time with that. We had, like I said, finger food. It was heavy enough that if you were late to dinner, you'd be okay. And if you had lunch and you were getting a little hungry, but I don't advise trying to plan a meal. Although, and we can talk about this too, that there are other organizations that will help you if you're a member of, like in Atlanta, there's the Atlanta Readers Club. And the Atlanta Readers Club will set up a great event at restaurants, and people pay to have dinner and to buy your book. So, and I wouldn't have known about that if it had not been for some connections with my Wild Women and the Atlanta Writers Club. So, for book launches, you've got to decide how big you want it to be. I recommend simplicity at the because it'll drive you crazy. If not, I do have my props today. Trying to get some inspiration, and I saw these pineapples in the store, and I thought, oh, I'll have white sangria. I'll put pineapples in them. Maybe I'll have some pineapples sitting around, although they are a pain to cut on your own. And then I kind of built it around that. We'd have some fruit. Well, nuts and cheese and crackers, that sort of stuff. And for the first time, I ordered a cake that's going to have a cake topper with my cover on it. And I love this cover. So it's going to be really fun.
That's this
That,
one.
yes, the Substitute
Sometime.
Sister, which was the unplanned sequel to the Sometime Sister. So make your book launches as enjoyable for yourself as you possibly can. They do make me nervous. And if I think of them as get-togethers, they make me less nervous. I have had one that I spoke at, and that was fun. It was in a bookstore,
You
and
filled the bookstore to the
that was
bookstore.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you have to promote it yourself. A lot of the people, I would say the majority of people in that bookstore were people I had some connection to, and delightfully, they brought some of their friends. I had also been a speaker at one of their book clubs. So just be making these connections. And writers, we love books. So it's not a hardship to go into a bookstore and see if they've got book clubs and if anybody's interested in you. And if they're not, if you're interested in what that book club's doing, and if you have the time to make contacts with it. But that one had a more formal talk. In my first one, I didn't talk at all. I just let people mingle. And what I think I'm going to do on this one, it's going to be kind of organic. But I'm thinking since it's 4 to 6, maybe at 5, I'll ask if people would like to talk a little bit about anything and do the same thing maybe at 7, although I doubt if I'll have a full house throughout the whole thing. That'll be something to let you know about if it's worth having a longer time.
Please do, and please send me pictures so that we can put up a little short. I was planning on being there,
I
and
know.
for several reasons I can't, but I'm in Georgia so much that it's like a second home. So I'm hoping that, well, but we'll be there in Georgia in, what is the date on that?
June 24th, we're going to be in this really cute little town called Gainesville. And I had not been there and did not know about this book store. It's called The Next Chapter. And The Next Chapter is also the name of an organization in that town that helps people, I think, that have perhaps some different kinds of handicaps or have had some setbacks. And the next chapter is the next chapter in their life.
That's
And
nice.
then, of course, the bookstore is your next chapter. So, but it's really a great little town square. If you I've been surprised at all these really lovely little town squares and small cities in Georgia that I never knew had such cool places. So we've been in Carrollton. We did
Yep,
a book
we did a
fair,
panel
yeah, a book
together,
fair
and
in
yep,
Carrollton, and that was a lovely little place and lots of supporters. I think people learn as they go on how to get people to come to these things. I recommend if it's possible, if you become part of the promotional effort, if you're going to be at a book fair, often it's not possible. And if it's not near where you live, I don't know how much you can do. But you go, you have fun, you learn. And that's surely what we've been doing these past years.
yep, absolutely. Well, all of the events that I've been to where you've been have been very successful. Do you have any tips besides food? Something about like appeal, making your table look good or anything like that?
Ah, like I said, on the first one, I went all out with that. On this one, I think it's going to be more centered on the sangria and the
Okay.
fruit, and yes, and making it just more like a summer kickoff sort of party. The the bookstore was very cool. They let us have our little punch in the back of the room. Not and people were I we tried to make people aware of it, but that bookstore was so helpful with making it feel like a combination party and learning event. So if you find yourself an independent bookstore, and unfortunately, a lot of them are in places where there's not a lot of walk by traffic.
Hmm.
So you really need to let people know yourself and try to get an interest going.
And that's a thing. Here in Florida, there's not a lot that have foot traffic. I found two where I'm going to be appearing, and they put you outside. Unfortunately, my book is launching in June,
Yeah,
and then we've got July, August, and who wants to sit in Florida outside of a bookstore in
yeah.
those months? So we're going to do that. But we're
I recommend buying some giant fans. And oh, maybe you could have like a tropical thing and have your fans like maybe get some. I have not been good at buying um I'm
prop.
calling them
Yeah.
tchotchkes, but you know what I mean. I don't have bookmarks, I don't have postcards, and that's next on my list to get. You
Yeah.
kind of have to balance, how much you spend versus how many books you're
You
selling.
do, and you can overdo it. We had done fans, and it says I'm a fan of Shadowrunner
How
on it.
cute. Yeah, yeah.
So, but if it's so hot that people don't show up, you're not going to be giving swag away anyway. So who knows?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Looking forward to the one in Gainesville because it'll be a little further north and
I
maybe.
have a I have a great idea, but I don't think you can keep them cold enough. They have those wine popsicles,
Oh, that's a good idea.
but they have to be kept really cold, obviously. But so adult popsicles might attract people, and they're cheap. So I
We'll
mean, you could a bunch
have
of them.
to ID people before we let them have them.
Oh, that's right, that's right. Especially popsicles. There'll be people coming for all the wrong reasons.
There's
Oh, and
all
you're young adult. You're young adult. So no,
that's
forget that.
true. Yeah.
You'll be
So
arrested. So
a whole nother category. So, I had a couple questions for you. How many books do you have at this point?
I have four out. Well, as of June 1st, which is Thursday, my fourth one comes out. It's the one that Kat has been so nice to put up on her board. It is the sequel to The Sometime Sister. It can be read as a standalone, but and as I said, I did not plan the sequel to it. it was my characters would not leave me alone. I had some characters I just fell in love with, my main character, but some of the other characters, the cousin Les Roy is a hoot, and they were just kept talking to me. So I brought them back and I did something different with this one. I had two narrators. And if your listeners would be kind enough to send some comments, if they can, I would love to know their opinion about books with two narrators. First of all, it wasn't as hard as I thought, and it was also harder than I thought, if that makes sense. I was able, I think, to get one is the character who was the main character in The Sometimes Sister. So I had no trouble getting into her head. The problem was not letting her seep into the head of the younger character that I was doing. And because they were very different in their upbringing and setting, I think it was easier for me to do. And I did it very straightforward. I don't like it when they go back and forth and you forget who's talking. I
Yeah.
had 5 chapters from Grace's point of view and 5 chapters from Natalie's point of view. And it was easy to keep track. Toward the end, when the pace sped up, I did have Grace, Natalie, but by then they were pretty well established. So it ended up being a lot of fun. I read a book, I think it's called The Paris Apartment, and the author had 10, I believe it was, different points of view. And I could not keep up. I would not recommend going crazy with it. Although the book I think is very popular.
It is
And
popular.
yeah, but for me, I would have had to do a chart, and I don't want my book reading to be work.
I've
So,
seen a couple of places where I think you were with me in Eatonton for
yeah,
the
yeah.
Writers Museum. There was a world building class there, and it was really cool. At first I thought, no, I wouldn't want to do that, but then I saw where one of the authors actually has maps. Actually, two or three of them actually has maps of their worlds, and that was a different thing. But I think most of what you write about takes place in places where everyone would recognize the terrain anyway.
Exactly. I admire people who do the world building. Kat does the world building. Um, that's too much for me. And um, I won't say that people who do world building aren't also character driven because her characters are outstanding and engaging. And a good friend of ours, Kim, who has a sci-fi romance, it's really her characters
Yeah.
that keep me into it. So I wouldn't say it can't be done, but I don't think I can do it.
So of
So,
all your books, if somebody was to come to you and say, we're gonna make a movie out of one of them, which one would you like to do and why?
well, that's fun. I think that the Sometimes Sister and the Substitute Sister would be a great Netflix series
I think so.
because it's already got two seasons built in or more. I think if I did a movie, I think it would be Trust Issues because Trust Issues is just well, it could be. It's not a rom-com. It has some dark stuff in it, but Trust Issues you could get you could get a little bit younger cast. Yeah. And I have a teenage character in there who would be a whole lot of fun.
I loved your teenage character. She was a hoot.
I love her too. And um I loved that there was a generational thing going on in that book that would be really fun as a movie because you could have an older actress and then we had a grandmother, a mother, the narrator is a daughter, and then this other child who's 15 and all kinds of fun stuff going on between and among them. So I think that would be a fun movie.
I like that. Now, if I was to pick one of your books, I would pick The Unreliables. And the reason I would pick it is because I would like to know how they handle the
The
fun parts of this
appearances,
book. Yes,
yes, I would
exactly.
love that too. And
I don't want to give it away, but
yeah,
there's a thing.
well, it's okay because The Unreliables is probably my most I won't say dark, but it it involves the creative process and thinking about writers and how they develop the creative process and how a tragic event in their lives affects that creative process. And one of the reviews I got was a nice review, but they said something like it blurs the lines between sanity and insanity. And I went, well, why? And then I realized they were talking about because one of my characters, the main character, is a writer. She writes a real sexy, take no prisoners gal, Garnet Rivers. And Garnet starts talking to her.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, doesn't that happen to every writer who has a strong character? It certainly happened to me with the Sometimes Sister when they said, keep do another one, do another one. And then I thought maybe I should be quiet about this and only talk to writers about it because I think writers understand. I think the rest of the population might think we're nuts.
I don't think so. I think, and as a matter of fact, the reason that I liked that one and mentioned it to several people when they asked me what would be the first one you would start with, and I loved Garnet to start with. But the other thing is, I felt like I could see the what was it called, the Sixth Sense?
Yes,
Some
yes,
clue as to what's going on if they're going to do this visually.
right.
And it has
Yeah.
to be something that when you get done with the movie, you say, oh, why didn't I see that?
And oh, it's not so crazy after all.
No, it's not.
Or they could go a different direction
It's
and
not.
say, maybe you have to be crazy to be a writer. And that's a good thing. So
Yes.
yeah, I loved, like I said, I managed to do that, slip in that promo stuff you're trying to you have to do, but you do love your books. I mean, they're like children, and it's like I always think I love the one I'm with. So the book that I'm working on now, it's like, is that going to be my favorite book for now? It is. And that, but I don't want the other books to hear that. So
So I will have links at the bottom of this video for people to find you and your books. And but where can they find you for your appearances?
oh, well, that's a good question. We're going to be in Gainesville, and there will be, if you're near Sharpsburg, there's a hometown novel site. Is September 16th.
Okay.
And we're adding book events all the time. And I need to update my website so that I can get those on there. I know, that's one of those things that slips up on you. I wish I had the money to have somebody do a website for me and keep it up. I don't. But I'm learning how to do them. I mean, I sort of knew how to put a basic one together. It's not my thing, but it's
Well, I will
serviceable.
tell you that I actually paid money for mine and you wouldn't know it. So sometimes,
Yeah, yeah. You just and oh, we didn't talk about newsletters, but I love newsletters. I try to get one out a month. And recently, I've only been sending newsletters out that had my events in the newsletter. And because that's cool, you can get it done right away. And you can reach lots more people than if you just send evites to events. So I use ConvertKit, the free
okay,
version,
okay.
and I like it. I would recommend it. And it's mostly intuitive. There's a few things that make me scratch my head every time, but people either they it will tell you the rate of the how many people opened it. So I noticed that if I have the catchy subject line, I do better. So those are just the little tips to remember to pique someone's curiosity so they'll at least open it, and a really nice image in the beginning of it. And
Well, and that's a good point too. The newsletters are really nice. It's a good place to find out what you're going to be doing. When is your next book? You do have a series coming out, and where are you going to be appearing? And on that note, I noticed that on all of your events, you have a sign up sheet so people can write their email down and be in the loop.
that's right. And you helped me remember that. I'm bad at that. And I would say if you're planning a book launch, go ahead and print out just something with lines on it. I may this time try to put a cool little picture image of the book, and you just made me think of that. So this is why listening to this kind of program can really get your mind going into places that you wouldn't go. So
Well, and readers too, because one of the things that I noticed was that readers have suggestions for us when we show up places. And one of the readers suggested to me the QR code. And well, I have a QR code, but I didn't realize where it goes. So now I have a QR code that goes to a link tree. And that's really nice because it goes someplace where it just comes up on your phone looking like an app, and it can tell you if there's a sale or if I'm going to appear somewhere or any of the cool things like that. So you can stay on top of it. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. But your author website would be a good place, or for people to sign up for your newsletter would be a really good way.
Excellent. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks. See, you have all these sorts of things that you would not necessarily think of.
Well, and I think that this is something, I mean, you got me thinking this way with asking me to join Wild Women. It was, I thought, why am I doing this? Because I like them and we enjoy each other's company. And then, of course, we had, critiqued each other's work too. But the other thing too is we have guests on who say things and I take notes. I'm, I
Even
think,
though we record it,
yeah, for sure. And not just from a writer's point of view, but also from readers. I came up with some of the questions that I came up with today came from people that I know wanted me to ask you those two questions.
oh, that's
So
cool.
that was really cool. And these are just readers. So people who
And remember too, for me, if it's not enjoyable, I don't want to try to do it. There's too many things that you can do and that you might enjoy. So if, like I said about the critique group, if you go to a critique group, I'd give it 2 tries. But you just realize it's not for you. Don't go anymore. Don't
well,
feel.
I think that one of the things that was really nice about the Wild Women's Critique Group, and not to get long on this, but I entered into this whole thing during the pandemic, which was so horrible for everybody. But for me, it put me in touch with two critique groups because everybody went online. So that was really great.
Right, right.
But I was already in the critique group with you guys. And so then when the podcast started, I already knew what I was getting into, already knew who I was talking to. And that's really good. But the critique groups can be really fantastic. I agree with you about that. But I think it was also very important that the Wild Women Critique Group was being run by people who know what it takes to get a manuscript done and possibly get them in front of a publisher.
And
So
I will give credit to the original. It was Atlanta Writers Club critique group, which I would still go to if it weren't so far since I moved. But those people had all different levels of expertise. And I had no idea what a query letter was. I kind of knew, I mean, from its name, but I learned about query letters. I learned about I knew I was a English teacher, so I knew what a synopsis was, but I didn't realize the tricks with the synopsis. Put your characters in bold. I mean, just learn so much. And you also learn where to go to find out more. And so that to me is really important. If you're going to be in a critique group, go in good faith, accept the critiques, don't argue. They'll have you and get people that you feel are supporting you as well as your writing.
yes, and I think the really harder thing to find is beta readers, but when you find them, you hang on to them. I call them street teams. Uh, so they're your cheerleaders, people who enjoy reading, and they're not particularly trying to write for themselves. For them, it's the opportunity to stay in a world that they love, and they know that the next thing is coming out. And so they say,
and they definitely feel like they're a part of something that's a little bit bigger than them,
absolutely.
which is what writing does for you. Even if you sell 10 books, you've touched 10 people that you might not even know who they are. And that's a cool thing.
That is a very good point. And I know I was doing publicity for a long time before I ever tried to publish anything of my own. It doesn't mean that I wasn't writing. It went in my desk drawer. But the return on that investment, which I never thought of it as an investment, has been amazing. People can't wait to help. And I didn't think of myself as helping people. I just thought of myself as being a fan. I was no longer getting paid to promote them, but I still believed in them and I still read their work. And so now that is coming back in.
Right. Good karma is very important.
Absolutely.
And you'd just be surprised at the ripple effects that a lot of these things can have.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to just being a decent human being. And that's just, you would think that everyone is. And but when you are, it really does pay off.
And for me, I say try it.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know how to do this. Don't say you don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it yet. And I'm going to see if I enjoy doing it. And if I do, I can learn to do it. And I'm older. I mean, and technology, I'm okay with it. I worked with young people, gifted people who were very good with technology. I learned a lot from my students. And I also learned what you can do with it and how you can get other people to do the stuff you don't want to.
Absolutely.
So I highly recommend the attitude of if somebody says, be a guest on my podcast, you say, of course. And then you go and look at other podcasts and say, what the heck? What am I supposed to do? If somebody says, please record on my YouTube, you go, I'll be there. And you do it.
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely.
fun.
Yeah, it is. Well, Kathy, it has been a pleasure. Always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. And it has been my honor to have you as our first guest. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Georgia,
Yay.
Wild Women event. And good luck on your launch. And I have no doubt that you'll fill the room. You always do.
Well,
And
good luck on yours.
time.
Yes.
Mine will be virtual to start with, and then I will
Excellent.
be doing some events around Florida, and that will be available on my website. It's going to show where I'll be, also starting a newsletter, so that will be something. But yeah, I'm very excited to be back in Georgia and seeing everyone and making the rounds, and it'll be fun.
Be fun.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and stay wild.
I will.
Okay, thanks.